Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Today's lesson is about reading and understanding research articles, which is one of the most important skills in academic work or academic research. Many students or many of you think that they must read every article from the first word to the last word. But it's wrong. Therefore, in this chapter, we will identify the effective reading strategies. So, let's start. This lesson will cover 6 main parts. I will begin with an introduction. Move on to scientific article. Next, identify the structure of scientific article. Then, the purpose of reading scientific articles. After that, efficient reading order. And finally, the conclusion. As you know, researchers spend a great deal of time reading research articles. However, this skill is rarely taught, leading to much waste effort. This lesson outlines a practical and efficient three-pass method for reading and understanding research articles. Widely used strategy is three-pass approach. First, skim the title, abstract, introduction, and conclusion. Then, read headings and figures, and only afterward, read closely for details. Now, what does scientific article mean? Scientific article is an article that reports the methods and results of an original scientific study performed by authors. The kind of study might vary. It could be an experiment, survey, interview, or any other kind of studies. But in all cases, raw data have been collected and analyzed by authors, and conclusions are drawn from the result of that analysis. Scientific articles are how scholars and researchers communicate with each other. So, through this article, the scientists share new discoveries, present evidence, and challenge existing ideas. Now, the question is, why we read scientific articles? Reading scientific articles helps you become part of conversation of your discipline by learning about the research that has come before you. Textbooks, websites, and popular sources are useful starting places for general information. But for the most current scholarly information, there is no substitute for scientific articles. The structure of scientific articles is defined by several distinct sections, which are abstract, introduction, methodology, result, discussion, conclusion, and references. And the methodology section combines two parts, materials and methods. Let's start with the abstract. The abstract is a brief summary of the entire study. And this section should be include the following: purpose, scope, result, and conclusion. Think of it as a snapshot that allows the readers to quickly understand what the study is about. Next, we move to the introduction. This section sets the context of study. It begins with a general overview of the topic, then define a specific problem that the author are addressing. After that, the authors identify gaps in existing literature, explain how their study aims to solve the problem, and clearly state their objectives. And finally, they highlight the significance and advantages of their work. So, This section provides an overview of research background, outlining the objectives and significance of the study in relation to existing research in the field. In the introduction section of scientific article, it should be include the following: general introduction, problem definition, gaps in literature, problem solution, aims and objectives, and finally, significance and advantages of study. The methodology part provides a comprehensive description of the research methodology to enable others to replicate the work. For novel methods, a detailed description is required, while well-established methods can be briefly summarized or referenced appropriately. It's important to clearly explain the resources, material, data, protocols used in this study, particularly for those with restricted access. The name of supplied, all antibodies used in the study should be provided. Furthermore, the methods of statistical analysis should be clearly identified, and any statistical software program used in the study should be appropriately cited. Then, we have a result section. This is where authors present their findings in a clear and objective way, without interpretation, and they can support their result with figures and tables. After that comes the discussion section. This is where authors interpret their results. They compare their findings with previous results, explain their implications, and suggest possible directions for future research. For the conclusion section, it's optional, but it's useful when the discussion is long or complex. It summarizes the main findings of study. Concerning the references, each article has its own reference style. Most articles, like original articles that have lab work, are divided into 5 sections: the abstract, the introduction, the methods, result, and discussion. However, the other sections are not necessary, and they are facultative. Now, and before starting explaining the different steps of efficient reading order, I would like to discuss with you why reading research article is difficult. Reading research article is difficult because they are not written for beginners, and scientific articles are written for specialists. And they assume background knowledge that many readers do not yet have. Also, scientific articles often use long sentences and technical figures, which make the main idea harder to see quickly. For most empirical articles, the emerald structure helps. What does emerald structure mean? Emerald, or I, means introduction, M, methods, R, results, and D, discussion. Now, how to explain emerald, or let's summarize each part. Introduction presents the research problem, background, and the purpose of study. Methods explains the design, data, sample, and procedure used. Result. The result reports the findings, usually with tables, figures, and statistics. Discussion. The discussion interprets the results, linking them to previous research, and explains implications and limitations. Now, let's discover the three-pass approach, which is usually used for efficient reading of scientific articles. So, in this approach, there are 3 paths. The first path give us a general view of the article. The second pass help us to understand the main argument and evidence. The third pass takes us into deep analysis, where we test assumptions and evaluate the strength of work. Let's start with the first pass. The first pass is a quick scan to get a bird's-eye view of article. This pass should take about 5 to 10 minutes and consists of the following steps. In the first step, the reader or the student should be carefully read the title, the abstract, and the introduction. At second step, students need to read section and subsection headings, but ignore everything else. The next step, he or she need to read the conclusion. And finally, you should glance over the references, mentally thinking of the ones you have already read. And after this pass, student or reader can also decide whether need to do any more passes. At the end of this pass, students should be able to answer 5 questions, which are: first, what type of article is this? Second, which other article is it related to? Or which theoretical bases were used to analyze the problem? Third, do the assumptions appear to be valid? Fourth, what are the article's main contributions? Fifth, is the article well written? Through answering these 5 questions, you, as a student or reader, can identify the category, context, correctness, contributions, and clarity of scientific article. Using this information, you may choose not to read further. This could be because the article doesn't interest you, or you don't know enough about the area to understand the article, or that the authors make invalid assumptions. Now, let's look at this from the writer's perspective. Incidentally, when you write an article, you can expect most reviewers and readers to make only one pass over it. Take care to choose logical and clear section and subsection titles, and to write concise and comprehensive abstract. If the reviewer cannot understand the case after one pass, the article will be likely rejected. And if the reader cannot understand the highlights of the article after 5 minutes, the article will be likely never be read. We can conclude the first pass by asking 4 questions. First, what is the study about? Second, how was it done? Third, what was found? Fourth, how credible is it? Now, let's move to the second pass of reading scientific article. In the second pass, read the article with greater care, but in your details, such as proofs. It helps to jot down the key points or make comments in the margins as you read. And in this pass, you have to look carefully at figures, diagrams, and other illustrations in the article. Pay special attention to graphs and ask yourself, Are the axes properly labeled? Are the results shown with error bars so that conclusions are statistically significant? These small details can help you to distinguish between high quality research and weak research. Another important step is to identify useful references. This is an excellent way to understand your topic. The second pass usually takes about 1 hour. After this pass, students should be able to understand the content of the scientific article. Moreover, students should be able to summarize the main points of the article with supporting evidence to someone else. Sometimes students will not understand an article even at the end of the second pass. This is maybe because the subject matter is new to students, with unfamiliar terminology and acronyms. Or the author may use a proof or experimental technique that students do not understand, so that the bulk of the article is incomprehensible. At this point, you have several options. You can set the article aside if it's not important for your work. You can come back to the article later, after reading some background materials. Or you can continue to the third pass and try to understand it in greater depth. Finally, let's look at the third pass, which is the most advanced level of reading scientific article. To fully understand an article, particularly if you are a reviewer, requires a third pass. To fully understand an article, particularly if you are a reviewer, requires a third pass. The key idea in this stage is to mentally reconstruct the article. In other words, try to recreate the work by following the same assumptions and reasoning as authors. This pass requires great attention to details. It should be identify and challenge every assumption in every statement. Ask yourself whether each step is justified and whether the arguments are logically sound. At the same time, think about how you would present the same idea. Would you explain them differently? Would you organize them in other way? This comparison gives you deeper insight into writing academic techniques and improves your own academic skills. During this stage, it's also important to note any idea for future research, because often critical reading will inspire new questions and improvements. The third pass is time consuming. For beginners, it may take 4 to 5 hours, while experienced reader may complete it in about 1 hour. By the end of this process, you should be able to reconstruct the entire structure of scientific article from memory, as well as you should be able to identify its strong and weak points. Furthermore, you should be detect any implicit assumptions, missing references, or methodological issues. And this table presents a clear comparison of the three passes. Another important part of reading and comprehending scientific article is taking notes. Effective note taking will save your time and help you clarify your thoughts. And creating a standard template for taking notes will help you to organize your research, enable you to make quick comparisons, and will save time rereading articles. Reading scientific articles is challenging, but reading them in proper order, correctly identify the author's main points, and taking effective notes will save your time and make your research easier. In conclusion, reading scientific articles become easier when students use a clear strategy instead of trying to understand everything at once. By following the IMRA structure and asking for guiding questions, readers can move step by step from overview to deeper analysis and develop real academic confidence.